Coming up today on Locked On at Texas Tech, we're speculating on the lay of the land in the Big 12 Conference this season. And also, do you hear the sound? The bell tolls for the Pac-12.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to see you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks, as always, for making us your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Today's episode brought to you by Birddogs. Go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege, and you're going to get a free custom tumbler with every order at birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. He's the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Great to be back with you once again. Spent a lot of time yesterday, Chris, talking Red Raiders specifically, and that was for good reason because we had a lot of good news to get into after the recruiting haul that was the weekend for Joey McGuire and company. But that wasn't the only news emerging from the weekend, and this actually seemed like it could be tied to some movement in the near future. We're going to get into a realignment roundup to kick off the show here today. We'll get into some San Diego State. We'll get into some SMU. We'll get into Pac-12 projections now at long last finally being reported. But, Chris, why don't we set the table with this? I'd love to go back to the Marshawn and Uran podcast, Sports Business Journal guys, New York Post sports media guy. One of the better podcasts, probably the best podcast in the country, if you're interested in these kinds of things. And just to set the table for Big 12, Pac-12 type of expectation, as we sit here at this hour on June 21st, still waiting for a deal to emerge. So here's some of the context before we dive into the deep end of this pool. Here is Andrew Marshawn.
Look, if we can go down all of them, ESPN, unlikely. Amazon, unlikely. CBS, no. NBC USA, no. Fox, no. Okay, those are the biggest players. Then you get into Apple. They're a little bit of a wild card.
I'm not sure if ESPN's a no. They're just sort of not a yes for a big package and a big payment.
I'd be very surprised if they got the same as the Big 12 from ESPN.
So it seems like nothing out there to suggest similarity, Chris, between the Big 12 and the Pac-12. You just heard it right there, and you're hearing the list of networks that are not going to be involved. I don't know if that's shocking to you or not, but look, we've been waiting for rubber to meet the road, and here we are late June, buddy, and those tires are squealing in Pac-12 country, I think, right now.
Yeah, you know, and I think because I think we go back to last week and – you know, when San Diego State, you see the report, I'm thinking, okay, now that here's some real news. Like we're going to have movement, and it appears that San Diego State kind of, I don't know, mismanaged or maybe overplayed their hand a bit on, hey, can we just like have a month to think about this and kind of ease out of the Mountain West and all that. And, you know, anytime you have to send a letter to clarify your original letter, somebody screwed up. And it was kind of like the first letter was the unofficial, official exit letter, you know? And so I think the Mountain West were like, they just skipped to the end and like, okay, we know which way this is going to go. We get it. So I don't know where that stands, but it all relates to the Pac-12. San Diego State must have felt or must feel like they've got a seat at the table at the Pac-12 or the Big 12. And I don't believe, based on the reporting, I don't believe that the Big 12 is really heavily in play with San Diego State. I think there's been conversations. I think they've kicked the tires there. I think that, I've had conversations with people that are aware of San Diego State's situation going back to 6 months to a year ago, well before their title game appearance and all that with the basketball this past March. But it goes back to the Pac-12, and what you hear from that clip right there is that there are people out there speculating, and this isn't new, but there are people re-reporting it, and then you hear folks that are in the industry like Andrew Marchand who has a really good feel for sports business, and he's telling you these are the networks that are out and or highly unlikely, or if they are in, they're in it at a minimal, fee or whatever.
Yeah.
And he's going through the main players. And so what you're starting to hear is that the 20 to 25 million maybe per school is about as good as you're going to do. But I would even say that even with that, a lot of that would, your programming would not be on your regular linear, platform. It would be, a lot of it would be streamed and all that. So I think that, this is where I think you're starting to hear more and more about Colorado and now Arizona going, we can't wait any longer. We're tired of waiting. We are getting antsy. We're trying to put budgets together. We know about the University of Washington situation. We know about the Washington State situation where they've in a hiring freeze and they're cutting costs at the University of Washington. So it's just – but I thought the San Diego State thing for a minute, I thought, okay, now the ball's about to start rolling. And I'm not quite sure if that is going to begin it yet because San Diego State may have kind of, I don't know, jumped the gun a bit or maybe they just, because if they knew they had a spot in one of these leagues and they were going to take it, they wouldn't have said, hey, can we just have like a month
Yes.
Of grace to kind of
extra time.
Yeah. So anyway, I think you get what I'm putting.
Yeah, what do you need extra time for if you've already got a seat somewhere? You just running late. It's hilarious to think about the reality check or ego check that some could get if they try to jump out there, I guess, in front or make the move the earliest. And then all of a sudden you're like, all right, well, we're going to be the domino that knocks down all the rest of the dominoes. And then you push your domino down. I'm sorry, your Aztec domino is not big enough to knock another domino down. I guess it's like, well, here we are. Anyone? Whack? Where's the whack at? I mean, they're going to start answering the phone for any conference, giving them a call because they're out there on the end of the plank. That was really interesting. And if it's a misplay, it's so hard to believe, Chris. It's so hard to believe. I know that just in general, as I've grown older, whether it's within sports business or, whatever level of competition, college athletics, professional athletics, or just in general outside of sports. As a kid, you look at adults in nice suits and you think that they must really know something that's going on. Like they must never miss whenever they fire their shots. Then you get older and you realize, no, most are winging it entirely. And sometimes you get to the point, the guy with the nicest suit is the most insulated from reality. He's making the worst calls. He's got the worst feel for what to do when. So I don't know if you attribute some of this to just total mistake, but even with that reality just described, it's hard to believe that it's a mistake this significant, given all the time you've had to kind of, prepare for what your move was going to be, all the phone calls you could have made if you're San Diego State administration or leadership by this point in time. So until I learn otherwise or have confirmed otherwise, Chris, I'm going to assume I'm missing something and that they've got some logic that is yet to be revealed as to why that was done, because that was such a big matzo ball hanging out there in the air. But I just can't fathom that somebody would screw it up that badly. But you're exactly right. Like, how could it not be a screw up if you had to send a second letter to clarify what your first letter was all about? They're like going Nate Oates on us. Well, unfortunately, I made an unfortunate remark earlier. And that's not what I remember. Nate Oates' player murder comments, or he's like,
Yes.
Wrong place, wrong time. 5 hours later, he had to release another statement.
Yeah.
These unfortunate remarks that were made by me, so I don't know how you screw something up that badly in what would seem to be a fairly influential position of leadership, at least as far as San Diego State is concerned. I don't know if anybody cares about San Diego State, but I care about dominoes falling.
Yeah.
So that's why that was really interesting. But the Pac-12 projections, Chris, little frightening for those in that territory, I'd have to think. Probably not shocking, shouldn't be if you've been paying attention. But yeah, the 22 to 25 million is one thing that is not going to cut it. But I don't know if you saw the other projections rolling out afterwards, like, okay, well, what does unequal revenue sharing look like? And there are scenarios out there that are cutting everyone but Oregon and Washington down to 16 million in order just to keep it together by offering up some cash as the Ducks and Huskies are passing the plate around, I guess. All right, who wants us to stay? Who wants to chip in if you want? So none of those numbers are tenable. 22, 25, 16, none of that's working. And you may get some extremely short-term agreement if you just don't have another, pad to hop on within the pond. But, Chris, those numbers don't work. I mean, that's even worse, clearly, than what USC and others were experiencing, and that's why they're gone prior to this. So those two significant pieces of movement, the actual projections being reported and the San Diego State attempted domino fall, have left me a little bit bewildered, but I think still looking at the same reality, which is Pac-12 programs are not going to be making enough to survive. I keep seeing headlines from some I respect in the sports media sphere, at least, saying exactly that. I don't see how the Pac-12 exists. I mean, that's pretty scary when you're sitting here at the end of June, and that's still the general theme, right? Because you had about, 8-10 months to fend off that kind of thing, and they've tried their best. Good effort, guys. But the writing has been on the wall. The numbers have been in for a while.
Yeah, and I'll say one more thing before we move on. This isn't a prediction. This is a spoiler. There ain't no way schools like Arizona and Colorado will agree to unequal revenue sharing. I don't envision that at all.
And they shouldn't.
Yeah, you're right, because that's as soon as anybody. This is why the Big 12 changed years and years ago, and it was just basically you just kicked the can down the road. You were on borrowed time and all that, and this is what would happen here. This is would be absolutely the beginning of the end if anybody in that deal would agree to it. But unlike a lot of those schools, the Arizonas and the Colorados, they have a legit option, and they've got a bird in the hand right now, man, and that's 32 a year. 32 a year plus the other things that come with it, the college football playoff, NCAA tournament, Big 12 tournaments, stuff like that, Big 12 Mexico, revenue. I mean, whatever Brett Yormark can tap into. I think that's, anyway, when I hear the whole, and again, I go back to this part, like, Oregon and Washington, like, they don't have any other options right now. I wouldn't give them unequal anything. There is they have no other option. Like the Big Ten, we could talk about blue blood, a big brand, or however anybody wants to phrase them, but there is no invite right now to the Big Ten Conference.
Right. Don't
know if anyone is set to happen or happen soon. And so, anyway, but it's a bit of a mess. Yeah. But I thought the San Diego State thing would get the ball rolling. Not real sure where that fits right now, but I trust I trust the Sports Business Journal folks when they say money's going to be difficult to come by.
Yeah, not going to be similar between the Big 12 and the Pac-12, and kicking the can down the road with unequal revenue sharing is a guarantee. Kicking the can down the road towards eventual destruction. I mean, your wife going to, honey, we'll stay together if I can have one boyfriend. Okay. All right. Sure. Well, I want to keep this thing together. Let's get you a little side piece. So you're getting, no, I don't think that's going to work. Although I never spent time in Utah. So maybe I could learn something new on my next trip there. Okay. Dead ahead. We're making a left. We're getting back to the Big 12 conference, specifically Texas Tech, because Big 12 all conference preseason ballots in hand. So some things to consider here for our guy, Big Handsome, and we also have Player of the Year thoughts on the way as well. Could be some shocking names mentioned up ahead on Locked On Texas Tech. But first, today's episode brought to you by Birddogs, the most versatile, best-looking, best-feeling shorts in the universe. You're used to those stiff fabrics other short makers are throwing at you, but that's not what you're getting with Birddogs. You're getting cloud knit fabric, which provides stretch without giving up fit. And yes, it feels as good as it sounds. Cloud knit fabric made from real, organic, cage-free clouds. Try them out today at birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege. Anti-stink, sweat-wicking fabric, keeping you cool, dry all day long. Made for all occasions because they're the most versatile shorts known to man. So check them out right now at birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege. And while you're there, enter in the promo code LockedOnCollege for a free custom tumbler with every order. You're not going to want to take your Bird Dogs off. I promise you that. You want that sculpted lower body look, but you don't have room for a squat rack. Forget the weights. Get with Bird Dogs. They're going to stretch and design to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg to give you that sculpt you're looking for at birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege. Thanks for joining us on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Always glad to have you along for the ride with Chris. I'm Casey, coming to you from west of the 100th Meridian, where it's really going down. Another great day in the great state, and it's great to be a part of yours always. Chris, football just around the corner, which means there are preseason lists to be considered. This Big 12 all-conference list that we got to get into here, I'm curious about because I don't know, aside from just maybe some logo choices and things like that, I don't know that some of these answers are going to be that obvious as you look across the league heading into 2023. Of course, we'll localize it with some Texas Tech names that could be involved or maybe just on the cusp. But I think it seems like probably, at least just given human nature, everybody's kind of got their own methodology, I suppose, as to how they want to come up with what their ballot is going to look like that we could see eventually represented on that list. So how do you typically approach this when trying to make some of these selections and you balance, what have you already done? What's your potential like? Do you really lean to one side or the other, or how do you look at it?
We got I got an email last week about the Big 12 preseason stuff, like you mentioned, and it's a ballot, and you fill out first team, you fill out offensive player of the year, defensive player of the year, and 1 through 14 and predicted order of finish. And most people that get this email, they won't fill it out, or they'll fill it out with without a lot of thought. There'll be some people that really think about it quite a bit, and so you never really look. It's a talking point. I think it leads us to this conversation here, and like as you look at the blank piece of paper, okay, go, and what do you do with it? And so for our conversation here, we'll talk about the 1 through the 14 and predicted order of finish. There's a few takeaways that I have, but placing these teams in order is a bit tricky, and at some point you just kind of go, who's first, who's last, who's bottom half, who's top half, and you kind of start to try to sort it out and kind of work your way. But I think in the last several years, you have like teams that were predicted 7th and 8th that have played and won the Big 12 title. Like I think Baylor was like that. I think, right. I don't remember what TCU was picked last year. They didn't win it, obviously, but, Kansas State won it. So it's just like these are exercises that often when you look back on it, like, ooh, whoa, everybody missed that one. But you only know what you know to this point. And there'll be injuries that alter the course of a season. A coach getting fired in the middle of the season altered. There's all kinds of dynamics that you just don't envision. As I looked at the poll, though, to be brief here and to fill it out, Kansas State, to me, has earned and deserves the right to be at the number 1 spot. And here's why I feel that way. You're going to hear a lot of Texas. I think you'll hear some Oklahoma. I think you may hear some TCU still. You're going to certainly hear some Texas Tech. Kansas State, though, one, I can't in any thought process I have, I can in no way put Texas Tech ahead of Kansas State in any poll going into the season. you can't beat Kansas State. You've struggled mightily against Kansas State. Kansas State owns you. It doesn't matter where these games are played. It's been mind-boggling. They just are where you would like to be. And so, if there was any trying to break a tie there, okay, I mean, head-to-head and all that stuff. But Kansas State obviously is the reigning Big 12 champs. They have all 5 starters back on their offensive line. They have the quarterback back that started the last 7 or 8 games that a lot of people are fans of. Yes, they lost Deuce Vaughn, but they got, I think, a 1,000-yard rusher out of Florida State via the portal that is supposed to, he could end up being like kind of Big 12 newcomer of the year type guy. And I trust Chris Kleiman, man. I mean, he's earned that. Yeah. They are consistent. They win. I think he's one of the best coaches in the league based on what he's done, and he's got hardware to prove it. Yeah, I mean, Bama boat raced them in the last game that we all saw in one of those New Year's Six games and all that. But I just think they're steady, they're solid, they're fundamentally sound. They've got a lot of pieces back, and they replace a big-time pass rusher. I think the draft pick by the Chiefs, and replacing Deuce Vaughn is no easy task. But they've got Phillip Brooks back. Anyway, so that to me, that's who I would go with at 1. Last place, which typically used to be you just pencil in your pin Kansas. I think I may put West Virginia there, or Cincinnati. I think those are the 2, which they're in close proximity with each other. But those are the 2 I have the most questions about that I think have. One is a new coach. Neil is a coach that's been there for a while, but it's just like they've had a hard time holding on to staff. Graham Harrell left. I don't think they have an answer at quarterback. I don't think they're going to be very dynamic or explosive. They have a brutal non-conference schedule. And so that doesn't have anything to do with the conference finish or anything like that for purposes of this conversation. But, but I would have Texas Tech. I would have them, no lower than 4th on out of 14. I think that Oklahoma is going to get a lot of credit here, and they should. And here's why: their schedule sucks. I mean, And so when you look at conference finish, they may not necessarily be as good, but they have arguably the best or one of the best quarterbacks in the league, statistically and otherwise. And I think that with their schedule, I think that equals more wins than not. And so I would have them at the top half of this league for sure. And then you get into, okay, do you buy the Texas hype? Do you think TCU is going to take a step back? But that's kind of my top 5 right there in some order. But I think I would have Tech at either 4th or higher. And I'm not trying to hedge or anything. I'm just not sure. I haven't looked at it, filled it out yet. I just know I would have Kansas State 1.
I view Tech as having a fairly tough schedule, and I think the Oklahoma point you make is really interesting also and on the money, and that's kind of maybe the balance you're trying to find between a team like that or a team like Tech that's got those types of schedules. Like, what are you going to actually do given what your schedule provides? Not necessarily so much maybe what you think they are as a team, down to the minutia, but what kind of chances do you have via that schedule? And yeah, you'd have to kind of like maybe the road that the Sooners would have to travel as compared to the Red Raiders. I can't disagree with the K-State thoughts at all. I'm very curious about Texas Christian's conversation this offseason because I know what the final score was in the final game, but you guys saw all the games prior to that, right? Like everybody remembers all those they won to get there. So I think they are going to be diminished perception-wise to a degree, but I don't know, Chris. I may continue to give it to them as far as preseason hype until there is a reason not to, So I know that also if you don't have the University of Texas so high on your list, they won't even send you a ballot the following season, so you're obligated to do that. But there's a lot of purple at the top of my list, man. I'm not liking that too much.
Yeah. TCU replaced. There's nobody in the league that's having to replace more. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Your stud receiver, your quarterback who was a Heisman Trophy was at the ceremony. Your starting running back, who was a stud, 2 really good offensive linemen that went to the NFL, top key playmakers on defense, a couple of corners, some guys up front. I mean, they were gutted in many ways, but they did go to the portal and they added some high profile guys, and they had some Bama transfers and things like that. But their deal may just be Chandler Morris. There's and how good he is. There's a couple of wild cards there that I think it's really hard to try to figure out. That's like Baylor and Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
I think Baylor is just barely removed from a Big 12 championship, and then they were at one point last year when we saw them, they were okay. They're about to get it rolling and all that, and they just kind of limp to the finish line a little bit. And so I don't know what to make of them. Are they trending up? Or are they trending down? And so are they holding steady? But they'll be heard from. And then Oklahoma State, and it's been a lot of turmoil there, and there's this mass exodus and then influx from the portal. But I remind everybody, at some point in mid-October when they came back and they beat Texas, they were a top 10 team in the country. Mm-hmm. Then I think they lose, 4 of their last 5 games. The wheels kind of came off, but they still have a streak of 17 years in a row where they've won 7 or more games. 17 years in a row. People can make fun of the mullet and Mike Gundy all they want. Those streaks are extremely rare, especially with one guy at the helm. It's almost unicorn worthy, like it doesn't exist. And so I just would, people are ready to kind of finally pour the dirt on them and just, or shovel the dirt on them and kind of be done with it. And they're about to go back to where they came from, but they have just been the model of consistency. And there's plenty, I think there's 8 or 9 or even 10 of those 17 years where there's double digit wins. Now I'm not going to predict that for this year. I would just say that be very careful about burying them on a poll like this and treating them like an afterthought based on the consistency that they've had. I mean, they've earned the right to hey, they'll be heard from for sure.
Well, I think you're touching on something there that is a good kind of contrast or comparison when you think about Texas Christian, Texas Tech, Oklahoma, the head coaching factor. Because you can talk about schedule or what'd you lose, what did you gain personnel wise, but there are coaches out there that we also expect to get all they can and then some out of that roster or against that schedule. Guys like certainly Chris Kleiman, guys like Mike Gundy. I view Dave Miranda, I think, in a similar category. Where is Matt Campbell? Is he still coaching the team in the league? We thought he was a pretty good coach at one point in time. But then on the other end of the spectrum, you do have Sonny Dykes, who saved nothing for year 2. Just went ahead and went to the national championship game year 1. Big screw up, Sonny. But I don't know how you view him as a coach necessarily. I have almost no feel for Sonny Dykes other than he went to a freaking national championship game. So really good start. Now what? Joey McGuire is that same conversation without the national championship game. You had a really exciting year 1. Fan base loves you. I don't yet really know what I think of you as a coach getting XXX out of this roster against this kind of schedule every year. I don't know. And maybe I'm wrong. Let me know in the YouTube comments if you feel like you have a better feel. But Brent Venables, been a great assistant to the man. How are you as the man? So far, pretty damn rough. I don't know. So I think there's a coaching factor that we have to weigh in that also, Chris. And some guys you give the benefit of the doubt for good reason. If they got skins on the wall, 17 freaking years of this many wins and Premier Bowl games, conference championship, whatever it might be. And then some you're out there kind of wondering man, I don't know. If it doesn't set up well for them, I don't expect that coach to, take them anywhere that anybody else wouldn't. But it's kind of interesting to think about those 3. I think I just named specifically McGuire, Dykes, Venables. A lot of attention. Venables for a different reason. You're the head coach at Oklahoma, so obviously you're going to have a lot of attention. But Sonny Dykes got attention for obvious reasons, and the buzz around Joey McGuire for some obvious reasons. But what can you do the next time around? Because if it's going well, the buzz and the vibe, that can all disappear immediately. And in the Venables case, it's been going poorly, but you could turn that around pretty quickly with an advantageous schedule. So we'll know more about those guys I mentioned, obviously, with another year in the books, but I think there's still some unknown as far as wanting to just give them the benefit of the doubt. Those are the guys under headsets, and we're talking about teams in general, but let's get to some personnel, Chris, because I'm really interested in some of these individual mentions as far as you said there. You'll have some first team, second team, that kind of stuff, but you'll also have offensive player of the year, defensive player of the year. I think we get like some freshman or newcomer type stuff. Either way, player of the year conversation has already been pretty interesting as far as some of the names that have been mentioned, including some we're familiar with, Chris. But I'm curious from, let's just say, an offensive player of the year. Is there an obvious answer for you, or are you having to think about it, maybe a handful of guys? Let's just say an offensive player of the year. Is there an obvious answer for you, or are you having to think about it, maybe a handful of guys?
There to me, there's not an obvious answer. I think you just kind of have to, spin the wheel a little bit and then pick one, or you just have if you have a strong belief. But I think you can make arguments for several guys, and then some people are going to project a bit, and they're going to go, "This is what I think will happen," and so they're going to. And people go, okay, well, I can see that. But again, it's kind of you're taking a chance. There is no, statistically, Dylan Gabriel had the best year, and he's the quarterback. There is no, if you wanted to talk something other than a quarterback, Richard Reese at Baylor was really good last year. I don't know if he's preseason offensive player of the year good statistically. I don't think there's a receiver out there. So I do think this will end up being a quarterback. And I think, Jalen Daniels at Kansas would probably get a lot of – it's crazy to say that, but his numbers suggest that when he was healthy and they were undefeated and all that, I think he is electric. I think he's a really good player. But some may say, well, he didn't stay healthy. I don't know. I don't know if he's got enough around him. I don't know if he's got, going to have statistically the best year. I've heard conversations about Tyler Shuck as it relates to this. Like, again, that's a bit of a projection from somebody going, I think Texas Tech will have a really good year. I think Shuck will stay healthy. I think he'll have the numbers to prove it. And so, I've heard those conversations as well. I've even heard some Alan Bowman off the radar kind of as player of the year, one of the oldest quarterbacks in the country. Based on the consistency we were talking about, he's got a really good receiver that he can throw to there at Oklahoma State. And again, we've talked about how consistent they are. They've got a bit of an easier schedule as well. I don't want to forget that. And in the conversations about Oklahoma State, don't forget that on paper anyway, with what we think we know now, they miss some of these tougher teams. And so there could be wins there and finishing higher in the Big 12 race than you would think based on, oh man, they've lost everybody. It's chaotic. Bowman's, this or that, whatever. So anyway, just remember that I said that. But I don't know if there's a clear cut, man. And I would probably tell you that in my heart of hearts, I would write down either Jalen Daniels or Dylan Gabriel. And maybe that just based on what I think will happen, also based on, and you can't eliminate this, what they have done to this point. So I guess I'm going to mesh because Gabriel's statistics were really salty last year. And again, he missed a game or two, and Shuck outdueled him. Okay. So if you wanted to play that card on me, but I think Jalen Daniels is he's like an MVP type guy to where if they don't have him, it's going to be a struggle. And I think he's really, really good with his legs and arm and all those kinds of things. So I'd probably lean to one of those two. You could even have somebody, drop the Will Howard, name on you. And I would buy that argument. We haven't even mentioned Quinn Ewers, who I think may get some hype there. Yeah. So he's cut his hair. He's chiseled. He's grown up. All the narratives that you're starting to hear. So I probably didn't. Yeah, I don't know if I've wrapped up the conversation as much as I have kind of maybe confused everybody, but there is no clear-cut answer in my mind. But if you force me to, I'm probably going Gabriel or Daniels, and if forced to pick there, I don't know. I'd probably need a little more time to research it and feel good about what I would choose there.
I think Daniels would be the guy
Yeah.
if I just had to make a guess or a projection, because I think the media is just going to, in general, kind of like that pick better or that story better. Oklahoma stunk last year, so whatever Gabriel's statistics said got them nowhere but disappointment. So I think maybe Daniels would be, just because of the entertainment value, the pick that we'll see come across. But Quinn Ewers did cut his hair, and if that's the leading talking point for a player, he's had a damn good offseason. So he may be the pick as well. I wanted to ask you, but I think you already answered it. From a Tech perspective, it is Shuck or bust. He needs to be your guy, right? I know that goes in tandem with 5 offensive linemen and all that stuff, but Tyler Shuck needs to be your offensive player of the year. I hope that is something we're talking about from a Red Raider perspective.
Yeah, and like I think you're good. You're smart on the Daniels thing, because I think there's some that will whisper to you that Dylan Gabriel could end up splitting time with Jackson Arnold before all is said and done. The 5-star freshman that is in Norman, I think he's exceptional, and so I think he's going to get some looks, and we'll see kind of how that looks as the season goes along. So remember that I said that. But I do think, if you want to go to where you would like to go this year and contend for a Big 12 championship, be relevant, into November and hopefully into December. Yeah, Tyler, I think, really needs to play well, be consistent, and then be available. Not that you can't win with Baron Morton. Don't misunderstand that, but I think there's going to be a component here to where I think Shuck needs to be the alpha, the NFL draft pick, the things that, and I'm already loving all the Oregon smack that the Duck fans are talking about their guy Bo Nix, and they're dogging Tyler Shuck and all that stuff. Because I talked to Tyler last week. I told you he was up to I think 233, and he's really fun to talk to, because you don't feel like you are talking to a college kid at all. And I think that goes a long way. And he carries a lot of weight in that locker room. He is very well respected because of how he conducts himself, how he carries himself, and all that. And it's just kind of fun to watch it. And for a guy that hasn't put a full season together yet, he still has earned that respect, which should tell you a lot about who he is and all that. And he'll bust guys' chops. Back a few years ago, he would, whenever everybody was kind of dabbling in the NIL stuff and you're coming up with your own T-shirt and everybody thinks they're going to make $1 million on selling whatever, and then we've kind of moved on from that phase. He would buy some of these guys T-shirts that there maybe only sold 10 of them, but he would buy them and wear them in the locker room and stuff just to kind of mess with guys. It's like, but that's who he is, man. I love that. It's like keeps it lighthearted. He kind of jabs back, and you can jab at him, and he's got anyway. But he's clearly a huge part of what you expect to do this year.
I wonder if that's the new fashion line we'll see on Zambian children instead of a Miami Heat, NBA champion T-shirt. It's a Reggie Pearson NIL branded hoodie or something like that. Yeah. I remember that was one of the lines from. I'm glad we're out of that phase. I don't know if we're ever going to be out of that phase. Actually, hey, you want to sell your T-shirts? Boo boo. I'm happy to wear one. We're looking for advertising partners 365 days a year. I got a whole wall back here to hang up all the T-shirts you want. So get at me. All right, Chris, we got to get out of here. For Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. It's been great to be back with you once again on another round of Locked On Texas Tech, and we'll do it again tomorrow. Chris, enjoyed the time as always, man. Thanks.
Could be a big day today, boys. If you're out there listening, I don't know. Maybe, hopefully, we shall see. Wink, wink face. I don't know. But keep hope alive. We will do it again tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow will be a big fancy day. I don't know. We shall see. But
hey, I think they're all big if you're kind enough to join us here on Locked On Texas Tech. These are the biggest days of our life. So hope you do it again tomorrow. Subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode, and we'll see you then on Locked On Texas Tech.